The positive pregnancy test wasn't hers. That was the first and only certainty that pierced through Emily Carter's mind as the air escaped her lungs. The small white plastic device, with its two unmistakable blue lines, was tossed inside the glove compartment of Ryan's Ford Explorer, her husband. She'd only opened the door to grab a shopping bag she'd forgotten on the passenger seat. A mundane motion, an ordinary day that shattered in an instant. If anyone ever doubted her strength, sign up. Because sometimes the courage of a woman alone is what the world needs to see most. Emily remained frozen, her hand still on the door handle, in the quiet garage of the upscale apartment building where they lived, in the Highland neighborhood of Denver. The scent of new leather from the vehicle, which once brought her a sense of comfort and status, now felt suffocating. She took her birth control pill religiously, every day, at the same time, for years. There was no room for error. No possibility it was hers. Her hand began to shake, not a subtle tremor but a convulsion that climbed up her arm and threatened to consume her entire body. She closed the car door with a soft click, almost automatic. The sound echoed in the empty garage. She leaned against the cold metal of the vehicle, feeling her legs weaken, unable to support her weight. The ground didn't collapse. The world didn't crumble. The sensation was more physical, more brutal. It was as if gravity had suddenly doubled, pulling her down, crushing her bones. She breathed deeply, once, twice, 3 times. The air entered, but it didn't seem to reach where it needed to. The metallic taste of panic flooded her mouth. Emily was a dermatological physical therapist. She understood the human body, its reactions, its limits. She knew she was going into shock. She needed to move. She needed to get out of there. With an effort that seemed monumental, she straightened up. She grabbed the shopping bag that had been the cause of it all. Inside, the ingredients for the special dinner she planned to make for Ryan. A cruel irony. She walked toward the elevator, her steps strangely heavy on the polished concrete. Each step was a conscious decision. Left leg, right leg. Don't think, just move. Inside the apartment, the silence was oppressive. The spacious area, decorated with the elegant minimalism they both appreciated, now seemed like an empty stage. She placed the bag on the marble kitchen counter. Her hands still trembled, and she let a glass jar fall. The sound of the glass shattering on the floor was sharp, violent. Emily didn't move to clean it up. She just stared at the shards, scattered like the image of her life in that moment. She sat on the living room sofa, her phone in hand. The urge to call Ryan, to scream, to demand an explanation, was overwhelming. But another part of her, a colder and more calculating side she barely knew, held her back. What would he say? He'd lie, obviously. Say it was from a co-worker, that he'd given someone a ride, that he'd found it in the parking lot. He was a sales manager at a luxury car dealership. He was a salesman. His life was building plausible narratives to convince people. He was good at it. Too good. Emily thought about her own life. At 33, she had a solid career, a reputable aesthetics clinic where she was a partner, a reputation to uphold. She was seen as a successful woman, balanced, who had everything under control. Married for 7 years to Ryan, they formed the couple everyone admired. Attractive, accomplished, regulars at the best restaurants in the city. Her family, traditional and lively, adored Ryan. He was the perfect son-in-law, always smiling at the Sunday barbecues, always with a funny story to tell. The image of him, smiling at her father at the last family gathering, flashed in her mind. The ease with which he charmed everyone, the confidence he exuded. Was it all a facade? How many other things were hidden behind that smile? The tremor in her hands subsided, replaced by a coldness that spread through her veins. She wouldn't call. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't give him the chance to manipulate the situation, to turn her into the jealous, out-of-control wife. She stood up, went to the bathroom, and splashed her face with cold water. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale, but there was something else there, a hardness she didn't recognize. When Ryan arrived 2 hours later, she was in the kitchen, finishing preparing dinner. The glass shards had been cleaned up. The counter was spotless. "Hey, babe," he said, coming in and setting his leather briefcase on a chair. He came up behind her and hugged her, kissing her neck. "Smells amazing." Emily didn't move. Her body stiffened under his touch. She smelled his cologne, a mix of the woody one he always wore with something else, a floral trace, sweet that wasn't hers. "Tired?" she asked, her voice coming out surprisingly calm. "Exhausted. The day was crazy. We closed the sale on that Porsche Panamera, remember I told you? The client was a tough nut to crack." He spoke with his usual excitement, his eyes shining. Emily just nodded, turning to face him. She observed him as if for the first time, his perfectly styled hair, his well-trimmed beard, his designer shirt wrinkled just enough to look casually elegant. He was a handsome man, charming, a predator. "That's great, honey. I'm happy for you," she said, and even managed to force a small smile. During dinner, she listened to him talk about targets, commissions, and the business trip he'd take the following week. She ate in silence, each bite an effort. The food had no taste. The wine, an expensive Cabernet he loved, went down bitter. She felt his gaze on her from time to time, a bit inquisitive. "Everything okay, Emily?" "You're quiet today. Just a little tired." "Busy day at the clinic too," she lied, and the lie came out with an ease that scared her. He seemed to accept the answer. He kept talking, and Emily just nodded, her mind miles away. She thought about the pregnancy test, the 2 blue lines, the unknown woman carrying her husband's child. Nausea rose in her throat, and she had to grip the utensils tightly not to get up and vomit right there at the dinner table. That night, in bed, he reached for her. His hands roamed her body with a familiarity that now felt like a violation. Emily turned away, claiming a headache. "Again, Emily? That's the 3rd time this week." There was irritation in his voice, impatience. She felt a wave of anger so intense that for a second she thought she'd explode, but the coldness overtook her again. "Sorry. The migraine is killing me. I'll take some medicine." She got up and went to the bathroom, locking the door. She braced both hands on the sink, her body trembling again. She looked at the medicine cabinet. There was her pill pack, with the days of the week marked, all the pills taken correctly. Silent proof of her fidelity, her care, proof of his betrayal. She didn't go back to bed right away. She sat on the cold bathroom floor for nearly an hour, her thoughts spinning in circles. Discovering the pregnancy test wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. She didn't know what she'd do, but she knew what she wouldn't. She wouldn't be the victim. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't beg. She'd go back to that bed, lie next to the man who'd destroyed her trust, and pretend nothing happened. And wait, because the truth, she now understood, wasn't something you asked for. It was something you hunted. The next morning arrived with an almost insulting normalcy. The Denver sun, often bright and unrelenting, poured a clear, crisp light through the apartment, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. Emily woke before Ryan, an old habit that now served as a small trench. His side of the bed was untouched, since she'd gotten up the night before to take refuge in the bathroom. She hadn't returned. She'd spent the night awake, sitting in the armchair in the closet, silence her only companion. Exhaustion weighed on her muscles, but her mind was sharp, alert, like a cornered animal. She moved through the house with the precision of an automaton. She brewed the coffee, the strong aroma filling the kitchen. She dressed for work, slacks and a silk blouse, armor for the day ahead. Each action was deliberate, a way to maintain control over the chaos that had settled inside her. When Ryan finally appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for work, his smile was the usual one, easy and carefree. He grabbed a mug of coffee, his eyes skimming the digital newspaper on his tablet. "Morning, love. Sleep well?" he asked, not really expecting an answer, his attention already on the stock quotes. "Yes." The lie came out dry, a shard of glass in her throat. He didn't notice, or chose not to. His indifference was a knife twisting slowly. He finished his coffee, gave her a quick peck on the cheek, a cold, perfunctory touch, and grabbed his briefcase. "See you tonight. I have happy hour with the team. Might be a bit late." Emily just nodded, watching him leave. The door closed, and the click of the lock was like the start of a timer. She was alone. The silence that followed brought no peace, just the amplification of her thoughts. The pregnancy test, the unknown woman, the child that wasn't hers. The words swirled in her head, a poisonous litany. She needed air, needed to get out, to dive into work and try for a few hours to be just Dr. Emily Carter, the competent professional who solved other people's problems. The day at the clinic was a blur of procedures, consultations, and forced smiles. She operated on autopilot, her hands executing with precision the treatments her mind barely registered. Her patients, accustomed to her attention and warm demeanor, didn't seem to notice the distance in her gaze. To them, Emily was still the safe harbor she always had been. No one could see the storm brewing behind that facade of calm and professionalism. She returned home in the late afternoon, exhausted in a way that went far beyond physical fatigue. It was a soul-deep weariness. The apartment was silent, just as she'd left it. Ryan hadn't arrived yet. She kicked off her shoes, feeling the immediate relief, and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor. She was heading to the bedroom to change when she heard his voice. He was in the home office, the door slightly ajar. The voice was low, almost a murmur, but the acoustics of the long empty hallway carried the sound to her. Emily stopped, her body instantly tense. He was on the phone. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. I know what I'm doing." A pause. Emily held her breath, her heart pounding erratically against her ribs. She approached step by step, pressing her body against the cold hallway wall, out of sight of the door. "Stay calm, Mom. I'll handle this. She won't find out anything." The phrase hit her with the force of a punch to the gut. The air left her lungs in a silent hiss. "Stay calm, Mom." He wasn't talking to a friend, a colleague. He was talking to his own mother. The woman who called her daughter, who hugged her at Sunday barbecues, who praised her pot roast. The complicity in his voice, the calm with which he promised the deception, was more devastating than any shout. She froze. Her blood seemed to ice in her veins, and a cutting clarity took the place of the panic. There in that dark hallway she understood. There was no more room for doubts, for the small, desperate voice in her head trying to find an innocent explanation. The pregnancy test wasn't a lost item. The conversation wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a conspiracy, a betrayal architected and covered up by the person who should have been her greatest support after him. He was hiding something big, and his mother knew. Emily retreated, silent as a shadow. She went back to the living room, her body moving on pure instinct of self-preservation. She sat on the sofa, her hands resting in her lap, her knuckles white. The adrenaline that had sustained her the day before had vanished, leaving behind a cold, heavy void. It wasn't pain or shock anymore. It was resolution, an icy certainty that the marriage she believed in was a farce. She no longer needed to search for excuses for him. The phrase she'd overheard sealed the betrayal with a lead stamp. Now the only question that mattered was, what would she do with that truth? The image of the submissive, weeping woman, the wife who makes a scene, was swept from her mind. That wasn't her. It never would be. When Ryan emerged from the office minutes later, he found her sitting in the living room staring into space. "Hey babe, I got here a while ago, was handling some work stuff," he said, the lie sliding from his lips with a frightening naturalness. Emily turned her face slowly and stared at him. She studied him, the husband, the stranger, the liar. She said nothing. She just held his gaze, letting the silence stretch between them, dense and charged. For the first time, she saw a flicker of discomfort in his eyes, a small crack in his facade of confidence. "Something happen?" he asked, his voice a little less sure. Emily blinked slowly. "No, nothing," she replied, her voice low and controlled. "Just thinking." She stood up and went to the kitchen to prepare something to eat, leaving him standing in the middle of the living room. He followed her with his eyes, confused. That night, the dynamic between them had changed forever. He didn't know it yet, but he was no longer the driver of that story. She had taken the wheel, and she was about to chart a new course, one that would lead him straight to the collision he was trying so hard to avoid. Emily's war wouldn't be fought with shouts and tears, but in the silence of sleepless nights and the bluish glow of computer screens. The phrase she'd overheard in the hallway, "She won't find out anything," wasn't just confirmation of the betrayal, It was an insult to her intelligence. They underestimated her. Ryan, his mother, the unknown woman, all operating under the presumption that Emily was a passive piece on the board of their lives, a decorative figure that could be easily deceived. That miscalculation would be their ruin. The investigation began that same night. After Ryan fell asleep, exhaling the false tranquility of someone who believes they have control, Emily got out of bed. The movement was fluid, silent. She was no longer the wife who shared that space with him. She was an intruder in her own home, a hunter. In the office, the same place where the betrayal had been sealed in a complicit whisper on the phone, she turned on his laptop. The password was their wedding anniversary date. The irony was so thick she tasted bitterness in her mouth. She didn't search for messages or emails. It would be too obvious. Ryan was meticulous, a salesman trained to cover his tracks. Instead, Emily opened the door to the world he really inhabited. The world of numbers, expenses, transactions. She started with the corporate credit card statements, a territory she'd never explored, out of trust and disinterest. Now she dissected it with the precision of a surgeon. Line by line, she analyzed the charges. Dinners at restaurants they'd never visited together, always for two. Florists in cities where he was supposedly on business meetings. Small gifts, discreet jewelry, purchases at department stores that didn't fit his profile. They were breadcrumbs, but together they began to form a path. A path that always led to a name repeating in flight and hotel receipts: Jessica Hayes. The name appeared as a companion on a hotel reservation in Chicago, dated 3 months ago. The trip, he'd said, was for a sales conference. He'd called every night, his voice full of a longing that now sounded obscene. Jessica Hayes. The name was common, but in the context of those expenses, it sounded like a verdict. With the name in hand, the second phase of the investigation began. Social media. Emily typed the name into the search bar, her heart hammering against her ribcage. Dozens of profiles appeared. She was patient. She cross-referenced information, cities, mutual connections, and then she found her. The profile picture was of a smiling woman, with brown hair and lively eyes, about 30 years old. Next to her, a broad-shouldered man with a restrained smile. On the woman's ring finger, a wedding band gleamed. Emily felt a wave of cold sweep through her body. The woman was married. The mouse click was the only sound in the silent office. She opened the profile, which was public, a window into a life carefully curated for the world to see. There were photos of trips, dinners with friends, declarations of love to her husband, and there were photos with Ryan, discreet, in groups, at company events. Jessica Hayes was a sales representative, the co-worker, the travel partner, the missing piece in the puzzle. She scrolled the page, absorbing every detail. She saw photos of Jessica with her son, a boy about 5 years old. She saw the ring on her hand in dozens of photos. The woman wasn't just having an affair with her husband, she was betraying her own family. The pregnancy, the test in the glove compartment, the child on the way would be the fruit of a double betrayal, a secret that would destroy two families. And then Emily focused on the man beside her in the photos, the husband. His profile was tagged in several posts, Michael Hayes. Unlike Jessica's open and sunny profile, Michael's was more restrained, almost Spartan. Few photos, mostly with his wife and son, or in running gear from road races. In his bio, just 3 words: dad, husband, police officer. The information hit her with unexpected force. Police officer, not an executive, a lawyer, or a businessman. A man trained to handle conflicts, to enforce order, to react under pressure. A man whose profession was defined by codes of honor and discipline. A man who very likely wouldn't react to betrayal with indifference. Emily leaned back in the chair, her brain processing the new variable. The husband of the mistress existed. He had a face, a name, a profession, a normal life about to be imploded. She looked at Michael Hayes' photo, at his serious face, at the way he held his son on his shoulders. There was a solidity to him, a presence that contrasted with Ryan's polished, slippery image. In that moment, the plan began to form in her mind. It wasn't a thoughtless plan of revenge born of rage. It was something colder, more strategic. Confronting Ryan would be useless. He'd deny, manipulate, turn her into the villain. Crying and despairing would give him the power. But the truth was a weapon. And a weapon is only effective when used at the right moment, against the right target. She didn't want to destroy Ryan. She wanted something deeper. She wanted him exposed by the very web of lies he'd built. She wanted his mask to fall not by her hands, but by the consequences of his own actions. And Michael Hayes, the betrayed husband, the police officer, was the key. He was the external force that could detonate that house of cards. Emily closed the laptop. The decision made. The tremor in her hands had stopped completely. The coldness she'd felt in the last few days now had a purpose, a direction. She was no longer the victim in this story. She was the architect of its end. The days following the discovery were a monumental exercise in self-control. Emily moved through the marriage routine like an actress in her most challenging role. She smiled at the right moments, asked the expected questions about Ryan's day, and maintained the facade of normalcy with a perfection that frightened her. Inside, however, she was a well of ice and calculation. Every smile of his, every casual touch, every lie disguised as everyday conversation was catalogued in her mind, no longer as a wound, but as fuel for the resolution solidifying within her. She said nothing to her husband. The impulse to confront him, to throw the truth in his face and watch his good guy mask shatter, was a constant temptation, a scream trapped in her throat. But she stifled it. Confronting him would be momentary relief, an explosion of pain that would allow him to defend himself, manipulate the narrative, perhaps even flip the blame. It would be his path, not hers. She asked for no explanation, knowing she'd only hear more lies, more elaborate constructions to protect him. The truth she possessed was pure, incontestable, and wouldn't be tainted by the poison of his denial. Emily's plan matured in the silence of her sleepless nights, while Ryan slept soundly beside her. The strategy wasn't about destruction, but revelation. The truth didn't need her voice to be heard. It just needed a stage and the right audience. And the audience, she decided, wouldn't be her. The definitive move was executed with the coldness of a military operation. One afternoon, while Ryan was in one of his extended meetings, Emily went to the garage. The Ford Explorer was there, a silent monument to the betrayal. With steady hands, wearing latex gloves she'd brought from the clinic, she opened the glove compartment. The pregnancy test was still there, tossed in a corner, a small piece of plastic loaded with the weight of a double life. She took it, placed it on a neutral background on the car seat, and photographed it with her phone. The image was clear, clinical, undeniable. The two blue lines stood out like a confession. Back in the apartment, she sat at her own laptop, a safe haven amid enemy territory. She opened the folders where she'd meticulously saved every piece of evidence. The screenshots of hotel reservations in Ryan's name, with Jessica Hayes as the companion. The credit card statements showing dinners for two in distant cities. The chronology of the betrayal was there, mapped in dates, locations, and amounts. She selected the most irrefutable documents, the proofs that left no room for interpretation. With the digital dossier assembled, the final step remained, finding Michael Hayes' contact. It wasn't hard. Through a deeper search, linking his name to his profession, she found a phone number associated with a small security business he ran on the side. It was a risk, but a calculated one. She created an anonymous email, a disposable account with no link to her identity. To that man, she wouldn't be Emily Carter, the betrayed wife. She'd be just a source of information. The message was short, direct, and devoid of emotion. She attached the photo of the pregnancy test and the reservation screenshots. In the body of the email, just one phrase carefully crafted to hit the core of the issue, a man's dignity being stolen without his knowledge. You deserve to know the truth about your own life before anyone else. She hit send. The mouse click echoed in the silent apartment. For a long moment she stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The arrow had been loosed. Now all that remained was to wait for the impact. The response didn't take long. Less than an hour later, a notification for a reply appeared on the screen. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she opened the email. Michael's message was even shorter than hers. I need to talk to you. In person. Emily felt a chill. His reaction wasn't denial or blind rage. It was pragmatic. He wanted to confirm the source, understand the extent of the damage. It was the reaction of a cop, someone trained to assess a crime scene before acting. She replied, agreeing, and they exchanged messages to arrange a meeting in a public neutral spot, a discreet coffee shop downtown, far from the neighborhoods they frequented. 2 days later, they met. Michael Hayes was exactly as he appeared in the photos, a solid man with an intense gaze that seemed to see through superficialities. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He sat down, ordered a black coffee, and got straight to the point. "The proofs you sent me, are they real?" "Every one of them," Emily replied, her voice firm. "The pregnancy test was in my husband's car. The reservations are on his card statements." Michael listened in silence, his jaw clenched. He didn't show the pain he surely felt. There was just a contained fury, a dangerous energy emanating from him. He looked at the printed copies Emily had brought, running his finger over Jessica's name, his wife. "They think we're idiots," he said, his voice low and rough. "They live their lives, make plans, and us? We're the scenery, the home decor." In that moment, Emily didn't see a stranger, but an ally, a fellow sufferer forged in the same furnace of betrayal. "I don't want a scandal for myself," Emily said clearly. "I just want to get out of this with my dignity. But he can't just get away scot-free, not after this." Michael raised his eyes and stared at her. And for the first time, Emily saw the pain behind the fury, but she saw something more, an implacable determination. "Scot-free?" he repeated with a humorless laugh. "No, this won't end with an apology. I want everyone to know. His family, your family. I want him to have nowhere to hide. I want to take down the cheating couple live." The intensity in his voice was frightening and at the same time cathartic. He didn't want just justice. He wanted exposure. He wanted the humiliation he felt transferred to those who caused it, on a public stage, where the shame couldn't be denied or hidden. Emily thought about the next Sunday barbecue at her parents' house, the weekly sacred event. Her entire family would be there, her traditional parents, uncles, aunts, cousins. And Ryan would be there in the center of it all, playing his role of perfect son-in-law. It would be the ideal stage, the perfect audience. She took a deep breath, the decision solidifying like steel. "I'm in." Sunday dawned in Denver with a sky of pale blue, almost white, and a crisp air that cut the skin, typical of the city even in spring. For most people, it was a day of rest, family, tranquility. For Emily, it was Judgment Day. Every passing second was a step toward detonation. She moved through the morning with an outward calm that was the purest antithesis of the storm raging in her chest. The feeling wasn't nervousness or fear, but a heavy inevitability, as if she were about to witness a natural disaster she'd set in motion herself. Her parents' house in the Cherry Creek suburb was the epicenter of the Carter family life. A big house with a well-manicured yard and a patio out back where the grill reigned supreme. It was the stage for all celebrations, the safe harbor of tradition. On Sundays, the place filled with loud voices, laughter, and the unmistakable smell of meat on the grill. Today, for Emily, that smell seemed like one of sacrifice. They arrived around noon. Ryan drove the Ford Explorer, the ambient music filling the silence that had settled between them in recent days. He seemed not to notice, or chose to ignore, Emily's growing distance. As he parked on the street in front of the house, he turned to her, his usual smile on his face, a smile that now seemed grotesque, a poorly glued mask. "Ready to handle Uncle Jim asking when we're giving him a grandkid?" Ryan joked, trying to create a complicity that no longer existed. Emily just looked at him, expressionless. "Let's go in," was all she said. As they passed through the gate, they were immediately swallowed by the warm, noisy embrace of the family. Emily's mother, Karen, kissed her on the cheek, her eyes scanning her with the perpetual worry of all mothers. Her father, Robert, a man of few words and big gestures, gave Ryan a strong slap on the back, laughing at some joke he'd told. Uncles, aunts, cousins. Everyone was there, and all of them, without exception, adored Ryan. He was the dream son-in-law, the successful, charming man who'd won over the eldest and most reserved daughter of the family. Ryan flourished in that environment. He circulated around the grill area with the ease of a politician on the campaign trail, a beer in hand, the smile easy, the joke on the tip of his tongue. He was the center of attention, the unofficial master of ceremonies of that Sunday ritual. Emily watched him from afar, seated in a chair in the corner of the yard. She saw how he charmed her mother, how he listened with false attention to her father's fishing stories, how he played with the younger cousins. He was performing the role of good husband with a nauseating perfection. Every smile, every public gesture of affection was a silent stab. Emily exchanged short, discreet texts with Michael. "We're here." His response was immediate. "On my way. 1:30. She glanced at her watch. 20 minutes left. 20 minutes until the end of the world as she knew it. A small, terrified part of her wanted to yell for him not to come, to abort the mission. But the larger part, the one forged in the ice of betrayal and lies, remained firm. There was no turning back. Lunch was served. The long wooden table was covered with bowls of potato salad, coleslaw, cornbread, and of course the meats her father sliced with pride. Everyone sat down, the conversation flowing animatedly. Ryan sat next to Emily, placing his hand on her thigh under the table, a possessive gesture that made her stiffen. He leaned in and whispered in her ear, "You look so beautiful today and so quiet." She didn't respond. She just picked up her fork and knife, the food on her plate seeming like ashes. She felt her family's gazes on her. The aunt who asked if everything was okay, the cousin who commented that she looked pale. She replied with monosyllables, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Time dragged. Each chew, each sip of soda seemed to last an eternity. The clock on her wrist read 1:28. Then the sound. The doorbell rang. The sharp sound cut through the cacophony of conversations and laughter, imposing a brief silence. Everyone looked at each other. No one was expecting more people. "Huh, who could that be?" said Emily's mother, getting up to answer. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Her heart began to pound uncontrollably, a muffled drum in her ears. Ryan looked at her, a wrinkle of questioning on his forehead. "Did you invite someone, babe?" She just shook her head no, her eyes fixed on the front door of the house, visible from the yard. Her mother opened the door, and there he was, Michael Hayes. He wasn't in uniform, but his posture was that of a man on duty. He wore jeans and a dark polo shirt, but the rigidity in his shoulders and the expression on his face left no doubt about his purpose. He exchanged a few words with Emily's mother, who looked confused and then stepped past her, walking with firm, deliberate steps toward the grill area. The silence, which had been brief, now became absolute. Conversations died. Forks stopped midway to mouths. All eyes turned to the stranger invading the sanctity of the Sunday barbecue. Michael didn't look at anyone. His eyes were locked on a single point. Ryan. Ryan, who had a piece of steak on his fork, froze. The color drained from his face. He recognized Michael. The good guy smile faded, replaced by a mask of panic and disbelief. He looked from Michael to Emily, comprehension dawning in his eyes like a slow-motion lightning bolt. Michael stopped beside the table, a few feet from Ryan. His presence was an anomaly, a dark, disruptive force in that scene of family joy. With a slow, calculated movement, he pulled some folded papers and a small plastic object from his back pocket. He placed them on the table, next to the bowl of potato salad, with a dull thud that echoed in the deadly silence. The pregnancy test, the hotel reservation printouts. Everyone's eyes at the table widened, fixed on the objects. Emily's father stood up, his face set in a confused and angry scowl. "What the hell is this? Who are you?" Michael ignored the question. He didn't take his eyes off Ryan, who was now white as a ghost, his mouth agape, voiceless. And then Michael spoke. His voice wasn't a shout, but it was loud, clear, and loaded with the weight of a verdict. Each word was a hammer shattering the glass of that family farce. "Your husband got my wife pregnant." Absolute silence, a silence so profound that Emily could hear the buzzing in her own ears. Her family's frozen gazes moved from Michael to Ryan and then to her. It was a ballet of shock and horror. Her mother's jaw dropped, her hand covering her mouth. Her father seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Her uncles and cousins were paralyzed, their expressions ranging from disbelief to scandal. The protagonist's husband turns white, voiceless. Ryan tried to speak, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for the air that had been stolen from him. His facade, built so carefully over years, had been demolished in a single sentence. He was naked, exposed, humiliated in front of the clan he'd worked so hard to win over. The family goes into total shock. The shame was palpable, a toxic fog spreading across the table. That was the moment, the climax of Emily's opera, and she, the protagonist, finally moved. In the epicenter of the seismic silence, where each second stretched to the breaking point, Emily became the only point of movement. The chaos was a vortex around her, the shocked gazes of her family, Ryan's mortal pallor, Michael's granite presence. But inside her, a deep, crystalline calm had settled. It was the calm that comes after the storm passes, when everything that could be broken is already in pieces on the ground. She stood up. The movement wasn't abrupt or hesitant. It was fluid, deliberate, as if she were stretching after a long sleep. With an almost casual gesture, she ran her hand through her hair, adjusting a strand that wasn't out of place. It was an act of normalcy amid the absurdity, a sign that, for her, this wasn't the end, but a restart. She breathed deeply, the air filling her lungs, and the soft sound was the only thing that broke the tense silence. All eyes turned to her, waiting for the explosion, the tears, the confrontation, waiting for the script they knew. But Emily didn't give them the drama they craved. Her gaze passed over Ryan, not with hatred, but with a cutting indifference, as if looking at a stranger. Then she turned to Michael, an almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, of mission accomplished. And only then did she speak, her voice clear, without tremor, projected so everyone at the table could hear. "Thanks. I'm not wasting another day of my life on someone who doesn't know what loyalty is." The phrase hung in the air, simple, definitive, and lethal. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of facts. A dismissal. Without shouting, without crying, without explaining, Emily turned. She grabbed her purse from a nearby chair, pulled out the car keys from inside it, and walked away from the table. Her steps on the stone patio were firm, rhythmic. Each step was an affirmation of her newly reclaimed freedom. She moved out of sight, crossed the front door of the house, and vanished, beautiful in her resolve, cold in her dignity. Her exit was like pulling the pin from a grenade. The silence that followed was instantly shattered. The party, or what remained of it, continued, but now with him as the focus of the shame. Ryan, finally unlocked from his stupor, tried to stand, stammering Emily's name. "Emily, wait. I can explain." But her father, Robert, whose disappointment had turned into an icy fury, slammed his hand on the table with a force that made the bowls tremble. "Explain what?" His voice was a low thunder. "Explain how you turned my house into a circus? How you dishonored my daughter right in front of me?" Ryan's phone, forgotten on the table, began to ring, vibrating frantically. The name Jessica glowed on the screen, a second bomb exploding in sequence. He looked at the device with horror, as if it were a snake. The insistent ring was a cry of desperation from across the city. It was the mistress, no doubt informed by Michael that their world had just crumbled, realizing her own husband had left her to her own devices. Ryan was cornered. On one side, his father-in-law's contemptuous gaze. On the other, the desperate ring from the woman who'd led him to that abyss. He didn't answer. The phone finally went silent, leaving an echo of panic in the air. Michael Hayes, his work done, gathered his papers from the table. He looked at Ryan not with anger, but with a kind of somber pity. "Now stay with her," Michael said, his voice cutting, "and get ready for her to do to you exactly what she did to me." With that, he turned and left too, leaving behind the trail of his calculated destruction. Ryan collapsed into the chair, placing his hands on his head, fingers interlaced tightly, as if trying to prevent his skull from splitting. He was alone, a castaway on an island of accusing stares. His mother-in-law, Karen, who had adored him before, now looked at him with a mix of shame and anger. "You ruined everything, Ryan," she hissed, her voice low so the others wouldn't hear, but loaded with venom. "You had it all. A wonderful woman, a family that loved you. Why, for an affair, you threw your life in the trash." Her words hit him. He looked at the empty spot where Emily had been sitting. In that instant, the penny dropped with the weight of an anvil. He realized the monumental stupidity of his actions. He didn't love Jessica. She was an escape, a cheap thrill, a selfish impulse he never thought would have real consequences. He loved the life he had with Emily, the comfort, the status, the admiration. And now in his quest for something more, he'd lost everything. He was completely lost, a deposed king in a kingdom of barbecue and shame. Meanwhile, miles away, Emily drove aimlessly through the streets of Denver. The car windows were open, and the cool wind whipped her face, but she didn't feel it. There were no tears. There was just an immense void, a hollow space where a marriage had once been. But it wasn't a void of loss. It was a void of possibility. It was cleared ground, ready for new construction. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in a long time, she knew she was in control of her own destiny. The road ahead was open, and she was free. So what did you think? On a scale of 0 to 10, what score would you give it? Leave your comments saying which city you're watching from, and subscribe to follow our next stories. Thanks so much for the company, and see you next time.
Daisy Reed once believed that her love with Damian Lancaster was unbreakable. They met in their final year of university. She was an ambitious young woman with dreams of becoming a renowned fashion designer, while he was the poised and charismatic heir to the Lancaster financial empire. From late-night study sessions in the library to moonlit walks along the coast, there was always something deeper between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. Damian wasn't just her lover, he was her confidant, the one who believed in her even when she doubted herself. But everything fell apart just before graduation. One May morning, Daisy woke up to find that Damian was gone. Without a goodbye, without a single message. He vanished from her life as if he had never been there, leaving behind an emptiness she could never quite fill. She tried to move on, but nothing could erase the memories of him. There were nights when she wondered if what they had was nothing more than a beautiful illusion, and as time passed, she forced herself to accept that Damian Lancaster was nothing more than a part of her past. But the past has a way of returning, and she was completely unprepared for what was coming next. 5 years later, Daisy Reed had built a name for herself in the fashion world. She wasn't a household name, but she was a rising talent, known for her designs that were both elegant and powerful, a reflection of the woman she had become after years of heartbreak. She was working in her studio when an unexpected offer arrived. Lancaster Corporation wanted to collaborate with her on a high-profile project. Her first instinct was to refuse. She had spent 5 years erasing the name Lancaster from her mind, burying every memory of the man who had once meant everything to her. But this was an opportunity too big to ignore. So with a steady heart and the mindset of a professional, she accepted. On her first day at Lancaster Corporation, Daisy walked into the boardroom with unshakable confidence. But the moment the door opened, she froze. Damian Lancaster was standing there. He was no longer the man she had once known. Once a charming and warm university student, he now carried the aura of a powerful businessman. His tailored dark suit emphasized his broad shoulders, and his sharp gaze suggested he was accustomed to commanding the world. Her heart clenched, but she masked it with a calm, unreadable smile. She had learned never to let him hurt her again. "Daisy." Damian spoke first, his voice deep and controlled. "Mr. Lancaster," she replied coolly, deliberately creating distance. Something flickered in his eyes, but it was gone in an instant. He remained composed, pulling out a chair and gesturing for her to sit. "I didn't think you would accept," he said, his gaze never wavering from hers. "Business is business," Daisy said lightly. "I don't let personal matters interfere with my career." A shadow crossed his eyes, but he simply nodded. "Good, because I want you to lead this project." Daisy hesitated. "Why me?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice smooth yet carrying something deeper. "Because you're the best." It should have been a compliment, but Daisy sensed something more. This wasn't just about business. Damien wanted her back in his life. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to waver. "I'll do the job, but that's it. Don't expect anything more, Damien." He smirked, an enigmatic smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "We'll see." Daisy kept her promise. She focused solely on her work, maintaining a strictly professional relationship with Damien. But Damien did not. He was present at every meeting, scrutinized every detail of her designs, and found excuses to extend their discussions long past working hours. At first, Daisy ignored him, but she couldn't ignore the way his gaze lingered on her, as if searching for something he had lost. Then, everything took a devastating turn. Daisy felt her blood freeze as whispers filled the gala hall. Damien Lancaster. Engaged. The words echoed in her mind, drowning out the chatter around her. And then, she saw her. Anna Beaumont. Beautiful, graceful, everything society expected as the perfect match for a Lancaster heir. And in front of hundreds of guests, Anna smiled sweetly, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "I'm looking forward to becoming Damien's wife. We've already discussed having children soon. It will be a wonderful step forward for both our family and the company." The world tilted. The air felt suffocating. For a split second, Daisy was 21 again, waking up to an empty bed, to the realization that the man she loved had disappeared without a trace. But this time he was standing right there. Damien remained silent, his expression unreadable. He didn't deny it. He didn't look for her. The weight in Daisy's chest became unbearable. She refused to let him see her break. Lifting her chin, she turned sharply and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step carrying the pieces of her shattered heart. Damien stood beside Anna, his expression unreadable. He neither confirmed nor denied her words. Daisy couldn't take it anymore. She turned and walked out of the gala, her heart racing with emotions she couldn't even name. Anger, disappointment, heartbreak. She wasn't the same girl from 5 years ago, but standing in front of Damien again, she felt like she was being swept into a storm she had no control over. She was about to call for a car when a hand grabbed her arm. "Damien, what's wrong?" His voice was calm, steady, like nothing had happened. Daisy pulled her arm free, her eyes flashing with pain. "Are you really going to marry her?" Damien studied her for a long moment before replying. "That's none of your concern." The words cut deep. Daisy let out a bitter laugh. "You're right," she said. "You don't concern me anymore." She turned away, walking straight out of the event, swearing this would be the last time she ever let Damien hurt her. But she had no idea things were far more complicated than they seemed. Daisy should have forgotten about Damien after that night. She told herself their lives no longer intersected, but things were never that simple. Since the gala, Damien seemed to be everywhere. He involved himself in every stage of the project, giving feedback on things that others could have handled. He personally reviewed every design, even finding ways to prolong meetings just to keep her around. One late night, Daisy stayed behind to finalize the last sketches for the collection. When she finally packed up to leave, the sky opened up, rain pouring down in heavy sheets. She sighed, pulling out her phone to call for a taxi, but before she could press the button, a familiar black car pulled up in front of her. "Damien," he rolled down the window, his voice steady but leaving no room for argument. "Get in." Daisy hesitated. "I can get home on my own." "It's storming, Daisy." His eyes held something unreadable. "Do you want to stand here getting drenched or get in the car?" She hesitated for only a second before pulling the door open and sliding into the passenger seat. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the cold rain outside, but the tension between them was suffocating. "What are you doing, Damien?" she finally asked. He kept his eyes on the road. "I don't know what you mean." She let out a humorless laugh. "You're at every single one of my meetings. You personally review my designs like you're the creative director instead of the CEO. You're doing everything to keep me close. So I'll ask again, what are you doing?" This time, Damien didn't answer right away. The car moved through the rain-soaked streets, but Daisy could feel the storm raging between them. Finally, he pulled over and turned to face her. "I never forgot you, Daisy." She froze. His voice was rough, as if the words had been difficult to say. I tried. I tried to live the life my mother planned for me. I tried to bury the past. But the moment I saw you again, I knew. I never really let you go. Her heart skipped a beat, but she refused to let herself fall. And yet, you're still engaged to Anna. Damien exhaled, his jaw tightening. It's not what you think. She let out a bitter laugh. Then explain it to me. He didn't. And that silence told her everything. Daisy turned away, her hands clenched into fists. It's too late, Damien. We can't go back. He whispered her name, but she had already opened the door, stepping into the pouring rain as if trying to wash away the past. But deep down, she knew some things could never be erased, no matter how far she ran. Daisy didn't return to Lancaster Corporation for 2 days. She needed time to think, to soothe her heart after her confrontation with Damien. But on the 3rd day, as she stepped into her studio, she was met with an unexpected visitor. Anna Beaumont. She was as flawless as ever, golden hair gleaming under the light, lips curled in a sharp smile, but there was irritation in her eyes. We need to talk, Anna said, her voice clipped with frustration. Daisy crossed her arms. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Anna stepped closer, her voice lowering like a warning. I don't care if he loves you. This marriage is still happening. It's not about love. It's about power. Do you really think you can change that? Daisy frowned. What are you talking about? Anna let out a bitter laugh. Has Damien never told you? His mother forced him to leave you 5 years ago. She threatened to destroy your career if he didn't walk away. And now, she's forcing him into this marriage to secure the company. Daisy's breath caught in her throat. Damien hadn't left because he didn't love her. He had left because he was trying to protect her. Before she could respond, Anna's phone buzzed. She frowned at the screen, then scoffed. Well, I guess you're no longer a problem. Damien just called off our engagement, in front of the entire press. Daisy's eyes widened. He did what? Anna stared at her for a moment before smirking. Looks like he doesn't care about the company anymore. He only cares about you. Daisy sat by the window, watching the rain pour down over the city. She should have felt relieved after learning the truth, that Damien never wanted to leave her, that he had been forced to. So why did her heart still ache? She knew the Lancaster family too well. They never let anyone escape the chains they placed. No matter how much Damien loved her, was he ever truly free to choose? The doorbell rang, snapping Daisy out of her thoughts. She opened the door, and Damien stood there. He was completely drenched, his breath ragged as if he had run all the way here. But what stunned Daisy wasn't just the fact that he was here. It was the look in his eyes. There was no controlled calmness, no mask of a powerful CEO. Instead, there stood a man fighting for himself. I gave it all up. Damien's voice was hoarse but resolute. Daisy's breath caught. The man standing before her wasn't just Damien Lancaster, heir to a billion-dollar empire. He was Damien, the man who once whispered dreams into her ear, who once believed in love more than power. I didn't just call off the engagement, he continued, stepping forward. Rain dripped from his hair, but his eyes never wavered. I walked away from Lancaster Corporation. I'm not the CEO anymore. Daisy shook her head in disbelief. No, that's impossible. You spent your whole life spending my life as a puppet, Damien cut in. His voice trembled, but his gaze held steady. My mother said if I didn't marry Anna, I'd lose everything. She was right. I lost my name, my inheritance, my title. He let out a breathless laugh. But for the first time, I am free. Her chest tightened. Are you insane? You spent your whole life preparing for that position. Damien shook his head. No, I spent my whole life doing what my mother wanted, but for the first time, I'm doing what I want. Daisy froze. He swallowed hard, his expression softening. I let you go once because I thought it was the only way to protect you. But the truth is, you never needed protecting. You're the strongest person I know. He exhaled. I don't need a corporation. I don't need power. I just need you. A single tear slipped down Daisy's cheek. He let out a quiet, almost helpless laugh. "I spent my whole life trying to be the man my mother wanted, but you're the only one who made me want to be the man I really am." Daisy took a step forward, her heart pounding. She reached up, touching his face. Cold from the rain, but his gaze was impossibly warm. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "No regrets?" Damien laced his fingers through hers, his smile gentle. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." A choked breath escaped her lips before she pulled him into her arms. And for the first time in 5 years, there was nothing standing between them. 1 year later, Daisy never imagined she and Damien could have a happy ending, but with each passing day, their love only grew stronger. Damien had given up everything for her, but in the end, it was their love and his unwavering determination that changed everything. His mother, the greatest obstacle between them, slowly began to see what she had refused to acknowledge for years. Daisy wasn't a threat. She was the one who had brought true happiness into Damien's life. Without pressure or expectations, Damien returned to the company as a true leader, not one bound by duty, but by choice. They loved each other in the simplest yet deepest way. There was no more fear of the past separating them, only peaceful days filled with unwavering trust. Then, one magical night in Italy, where Daisy was attending an international fashion event, Damien knelt before her. Under the glow of city lights, with petals drifting through the evening breeze, he gazed at her with pure sincerity. "Daisy, you have changed my life in ways I never imagined. I lost you once, and I won't let that happen again. Will you be my wife?" Tears of joy filled her eyes. She didn't need to think. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want to." 1 year later, they were married in a sunlit garden, surrounded by everyone who loved them. Damien stood at the altar in a sharp black suit, watching as Daisy walked toward him in the breathtaking wedding dress she had designed herself. But the moment that warmed Daisy's heart the most was seeing his mother standing in the front row. As they exchanged vows, the older woman took Daisy's hands and whispered, "Take care of my son, Daisy, and thank you for loving him." Daisy squeezed her hand gently, smiling brightly. As they kissed, surrounded by cheers and petals floating in the air, Daisy knew one thing for certain. From a love they once thought was lost, from the pain of the past, they had found their way back to each other. And this time, they would never let go again. A year after their wedding, Daisy and Damien's life was filled with love, laughter, and quiet moments of happiness. Their careers flourished. Daisy's fashion brand was gaining international acclaim, and Damien led Lancaster Corporation with a renewed sense of purpose. But nothing compared to the joy of expecting their first child. From late-night nursery preparations to Damien reading parenting books with intense focus, every moment was filled with excitement. He would rest his hand on Daisy's belly, feeling their son's tiny kicks, whispering promises of love and protection. Then, on a warm summer night, their baby boy arrived. Theodore Reed Lancaster. The moment Damien held him, his eyes shone with emotions too deep for words. "You're my greatest gift," he whispered. Daisy, exhausted but overjoyed, watched her husband and son, knowing their love had created something truly beautiful. As they lay together that night, Theo nestled between them. Daisy murmured, "I never imagined life could be this perfect." Damien kissed her forehead and smiled. "It's only the beginning." Their journey had been filled with heartbreak and obstacles, but in the end, love had brought them here, to a future more beautiful than they had ever dreamed.